The jungle screamed, not in the way Earth forests did, rustling leaves or chittering birds, but in frequencies that clawed at the inside of a soldier's skull. Arachne's V's atmosphere was thick with corrosive spores and electromagnetic dissonance, enough to distort communications and rattle the bones of even the most seasoned sentinels. Kayla ducked as a pulse wave tore through the clearing, turning Sergeant Mora's mech suit into a burst of plasma and shrieking metal. The scream in her earpiece cut off mid-command. "Fall back, we need static." Then nothing. The team had been on routine perimeter sweep. 5 soldiers, full gear, aerial recon had shown 0 threats. They walked into a death trap. Kayla's lungs burned as she sprinted through a maze of thorned roots and bioluminescent vines. Her visor flickered, radiation surge. Her HUD screamed about rising toxicity levels, armor breaches, and something far worse. Unknown entity, multiple closing. One by one, her squad vanished behind her. Private Elian dragged backward into the thicket, his scream sliced into wet choking. Lieutenant Severo, swallowed whole by something with too many legs and not enough eyes. Kayla ran, not because she was the fastest, not because she was brave. She ran because she was the last. Her boot hit unstable ground, and the jungle yawned open beneath her. She fell, the world turned black. Kayla came to with a sharp pain slicing through her ribs. She landed hard on what felt like stone, jagged, but not natural. Man-made, no, it pulsed alive. Her helmet was cracked, filters hissing. Emergency systems kicked in, flooding her bloodstream with nanites to stabilize the worst of her injuries. But the real threat wasn't internal, it was the breath on her neck. Slow, rhythmic, enormous. Kayla rolled onto her back, every nerve screaming. Above her a shape loomed, shadow against shadows. 8 limbs arched like obsidian spears, glinting with sickly green bioluminescence. Mandibles clicked, venom dripping from them in slow globs that hissed when they hit the stone. The Colossus, she'd seen its likeness in military briefings. Do not engage. Arachnid-class apex predator. Last recorded kill count, 23 sentinels in 12 seconds. Except this one wasn't attacking. It moved with a deliberate grace, lowering its head until Kayla could see her own reflection in its faceted eyes. Multiple versions of herself, broken, bleeding, terrified. She didn't scream. There was no point. Instead, she did what her mind had always warned her not to do. She reached out. Not physically, mentally, and something answered, not in words. Not even in thoughts, but in emotion, an overwhelming tide of pain, confusion, and loneliness. The creature stepped closer. Its massive forelimbs rose. Kayla flinched, but they didn't strike. Instead, the front pair of legs gently curved inward, encasing her helmet, brushing against her temples. She froze. It wasn't an attack, it was a ritual. A wave of static rippled through her neural implant, overriding protocols, scrambling encryption. She felt something slip past firewalls she didn't know existed. And then contact. A web of memory flooded her consciousness. Not hers, it's a memory of being hunted, of fire raining down from the sky, of skittering through tunnels, clutching egg sacs that never hatched, of seeing its kin fall, burned, dissected, paraded in front of human research domes. It should have hated her, but it didn't, because she didn't scream. Because she listened. Kayla trembled, her lips parted. You remember. The creature's breath grew shallower, more deliberate. Its legs slowly retracted from her face. It backed away slightly, then turned. Stopped, looked over its shoulder, waited. Kayla pushed herself upright with a groan, ribs protesting. Her HUD was down, her rifle lost. She had nothing but a broken helmet, cracked armor, and a throbbing ache in her head, where something new now lived, a presence. Still she followed, not because she was ordered. Because for the first time since landing on Arachne's V, she wasn't running alone. The tunnel ahead glowed faintly. Mycelial threads danced across the walls, responding to the movement of the creature. It wasn't just a cave. It was a home buried deep beneath a battlefield. A forgotten temple of something ancient and dying. As they moved forward, Kayla began to feel more. Echoes of hunger, of grief, of fear, but not directed at her. No, those feelings pointed upward to the surface, to the war above, to the ones who called themselves superior, and then she understood. It hadn't chosen her because she was strong, or skilled, or brave. It had chosen her because she hesitated. Because when it loomed over her with death in its jaws, she saw more than a monster. She saw something trying to survive. They reached the end of the chamber. The creature stopped, rising to its full height. Kayla stared up, battered but unblinking. Its body glistened with armor-thick chitin and deep emerald scars that never healed. It lowered its head. Slowly, she stepped forward. Hand trembling, she placed her palm on the center of its face between its eyes. And something clicked, not mechanical, neurological. Biological. A web of light flared between them for a brief second, neural links snapping into place. Kayla gasped as her own memories spilled into the beast, of her childhood in the lower decks of orbital slums, of years spent hearing things others couldn't, of isolation, of rejection, of always being told she was broken. And for the first time in her life, they stared at each other. No fear, only recognition, only choice. Kayla whispered, "So we ride." The Venom-Spider reared back, letting out a deep, echoing chitter that shook the cave walls. Its legs shifted, making space for her along its armored back. She climbed, hesitant at first, then certain. Above them the war raged on. But below, in the dark, a new alliance had formed. Not forged by command or conquest, but by understanding. And it would change everything. Kayla had always heard things others couldn't. It started on the orbital station where she was born, Sector A7, one of the colder, darker rings. She was 6 when she first told her mother that the plants in the hydroponics bay were crying. By 8, she had stopped telling anyone anything. They didn't understand. They didn't want to. The doctors called it neural sensory oversaturation syndrome, condition that made her overly sensitive to neuroelectrical patterns in living organisms. But no one could explain why. Even through walls and bulkheads, she could feel the vibrations of pain in a dying insect. Or why she trembled during livestock shipments long before the animals were slaughtered. The school labeled her defective. Her parents used a different word, burden. By 15, she was living alone in an auxiliary maintenance bay, drifting between testing programs for failed recruits. Not good enough for engineering, too unstable for communications. Not aggressive enough for offense, but Sentinel Command, the division responsible for frontier scouting and defense, took in anyone who could survive initiation. And Kayla had survived far worse. Her time in Sentinel training was brutal. Every recruit was pushed to their limits, physical, mental, emotional. Combat simulations ran in zero-G. Neural feedback modules were wired straight into the brain, feeding false pain and adrenaline surges. Recruits were taught to act without hesitation, to follow orders before instinct. Kayla failed more than once. Her aim was sloppy. She hesitated during kill simulations. She flinched at the sound of dying creatures, even if they weren't real. And the worst part, she heard things, not voices. Not hallucinations. Signals. When her squadmates hunted simulated xenobeasts in VR pods, Kayla wasn't reacting to visuals or commands. She was reacting to something beneath it, an undercurrent of emotional static from the entities themselves, even when artificially generated. Something in her brain reached into those coded instincts and empathized with them. It made her slow, it made her dangerous, and no one trusted her for it. She might have washed out, if not for the war, when the Arachnes conflict reignited after 2 decades of silence. Sentinel Command needed bodies. They reopened clearance on Zone V deployments, considered suicide missions, and assigned unranked trainees to perimeter patrols. Kayla was reassigned to Unit 73 Beta, a temporary formation under an old warhound named Lieutenant Hess. Gruff, tired, and mostly mechanical below the waist, Hess didn't care about evaluations or psych reports. "All I need," he had said, "is someone who can stand and shoot when I tell them to. You do that, we're square." Kayla didn't argue. She didn't tell him that even in hypersleep she dreamed of Arachnes V. Arachnes V had once been lush. That's what the archives said. A thriving ecosystem, rich in biomass and undiscovered neuroorganisms. Then came the burn, a mass industrial sweep in the early colonization wave. Flamefall, spore cleansing, terraforming weapons that sterilized entire continents in under a week. The native species, arachnoid hive sentient, semi-telepathic, had resisted. Briefly, then they were erased. At least that's what Command taught. But as the dropship pierced the atmosphere, Kayla pressed her gloved palm against the cold interior wall and felt a flicker, barely a pulse, not human, not metal, alive. Day 1 was scouting, dense canopy, acid mist, mechs rusted to bone. The jungle floor hissed with corrosive puddles, and every breath required triple filter masks. Her squad joked at first, called it the spider graveyard. But no one laughed when a recon drone lost contact less than 10 clicks from their landing site. Kayla kept to herself, head low, rifle charged, but her senses buzzed. Not in the usual way. This was directed, purposeful. Like something was watching, listening, calling. She didn't respond. She remembered what Hess had said before they landed. "If you hear anything in this jungle, don't answer." That's not us calling, but Kayla had always heard the wrong things. The nights on Arachnes V were long and thick with fog. Bioluminescent vines curled like veins around decaying outposts. Her squad set up motion barriers and camped in a collapsed research dome. Kayla lay awake, staring at the stars filtered through poison clouds. She heard it again, a rhythm, not a voice, not language. Emotion, raw and unfiltered, it pulsed in sync with her heartbeat. Fear, curiosity, loneliness, rage. It wasn't from her squad. It wasn't from her tech. It was coming from below. Buried under layers of metal, fungus, and ash, something ancient hadn't died. It had hidden, and now it had found her. Kayla didn't tell anyone. What could she say? That she felt a presence beneath the ground, tapping at the edges of her thoughts. That her head ached with grief that wasn't hers. No one would believe her. They never had, so she sat in silence while her squadmates laughed and played hollow poker. She cleaned her rifle, adjusted her visor, waited. Because part of her, some primal instinct that had always existed outside of training and logic, knew what was coming. Not death, not salvation, recognition. The jungle wasn't empty. And neither was she. Kayla woke to silence, but not the kind that comforted. It was the silence of absence, of death, of something holding its breath. She blinked against the dull red glow, bleeding through her cracked visor. Her body ached, stiff and sore but not broken. Somehow she was still alive. The fall should have killed her. The thing above her should have finished the job. But instead, she was lying in a nest spun from cables, bones, and filaments finer than hair, yet strong enough to suspend entire corpses midair. The smell was sharp, chemical, and ancient. A faint mist of neurotoxin floated through the chamber. Iridescent in the low light, yet her suit filters whirred with steady rhythm. Kayla sat up slowly. The chamber pulsed. A living heartbeat ran through the walls. The glow came not from lamps but from fungal clusters lining the chamber, feeding off energy deeper than sunlight. And then she saw it, the spider, no, the Colossus. It loomed at the far end, silent, unmoving. As tall as a dropship, its chitinous frame shimmered like oil in motion. It had no need to crouch. The nest was built for it. For now, it simply watched her. Kayla's hands trembled as she reached for the remains of her weapon. Nothing but scraps. The energy core had ruptured. She was defenseless. The spider moved. Slowly, deliberately, it extended one of its forelimbs. Clutched in its spine joint was something familiar. A shattered sentinel pauldron. The insignia had faded, the metal corroded, but Kayla recognized the design. It belonged to the last recon team that disappeared on this planet 6 months ago. The spider laid it down in front of her, not as a warning. As an offering. Kayla's throat tightened. Was it showing her what it had done or what had been done to it? She stood on shaky legs, taking a step backward, then another. Her boots hit the edge of the nest platform. Beyond it was a sheer drop into toxin mist. No escape, no path out, only down, only death. She turned back toward the creature. It hadn't moved, but its eyes glowed now, subtly, rhythmically, pulsing in a pattern that vibrated behind her eyes. Not a sound, a signal. She staggered as something brushed the edge of her thoughts. A flicker, an image, not visual asterisk, emotional asterisk, fear. Not hers, the images came faster now, a tidal wave of sensation. Flashes of memory, of humans in fireproof suits, dropping chemical charges into tunnels. Of eggs igniting, of chittering screams, of nothing left but ash and steel. Loneliness, eras passed in seconds, it remembered every death. And then came the anger, not blind rage, but cold, enduring fury. The kind that simmers for generations, beneath survival instinct. Kayla fell to her knees, gasping. The feedback loop overloaded her implant, short-circuiting pain inhibitors. She clawed at her temple and it stopped. A stillness fell. And in the stillness, choice. The emotions returned, slower now. Calmer, sharper, curiosity. The Colossus stepped forward, not menacing but cautious. Testing, observing. It lowered its body slightly, angling one limb outward in a motion that, if she had to name it, felt almost like invitation. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just a creature, it was asking, and she understood. It didn't want war, but war was coming for it, for her, for everyone. Humans were sweeping the planet to ensure total sterilization. The alien factions orbiting Arachnes, V saw the jungle as a strategic stronghold, already preparing to bombard the surface if the humans didn't finish the purge. The spider knew. It had survived longer than any of its kind. It had hidden, endured, waited, but now it had chosen to act. Not alone, with her. Kayla backed away instinctively. "I can't," she whispered aloud, her voice echoing hollow in the chamber. "If I ride you, they'll kill me too." But even as she said it, she knew the truth. They already would. No one would believe what she had seen. No one would believe she hadn't gone rogue. No one would understand the bond forming in her head, threading through her neurons like silk, a bond that felt right. Not programmed, not enforced, chosen. The spider waited. No threat, no movement, only her decision. Kayla reached up to her helmet and released the latch. The stale air hit her like a punch to the chest. The toxins would burn through her lungs in minutes, but she had to do this unfiltered. She needed it to see her face. Her truth. She stepped forward, closer, close enough to see the cracks in its carapace, old wounds that had never fully healed. Close enough to see that the eyes weren't mirrors, they were wells. Deep, ancient wells filled with grief and memory. Kayla raised her hand. She hesitated, then with a slow, deliberate breath, touched the center of its head. The response was immediate. A flash of neural fire lit up her vision. Her implant surged, not with pain, but with clarity. Her heartbeat synced to something deeper. Muscles relaxed in ways she didn't know they could. A new rhythm pulsed through her, the The ritual had begun. The web spun itself through her synapses. Layers of thought unfolded, not hers, not the creature's, but shared. Not communication, not command, merging. Kayla gasped as memories not her own became hers. The sound of 1,000 unborn voices. The feeling of earth trembling beneath hundreds of legs. The sorrow of laying eggs in a hollow cave, knowing they'd never hatch. And she gave her memories in return, her childhood. Her rejection, the tests, the silence, the shame, her desperate hunger to be useful asterisk to someone. To be more than a broken girl who heard things no one else did. And for the first time, the silence loved her back. Kayla opened her eyes. The Colossus bent down, lowering itself flat. Legs shifted, plates retracted. A saddle of hardened bone and silk emerged, a place prepared for one rider only. She stepped onto its back. Above them, the war was still raging. But down here, in the depths of what the world had tried to forget, a new weapon had been born. One not made in a lab, not forged in anger, but born from mutual extinction and chosen survival. They rose together, and the jungle watched. The jungle parted like breath held too long. Kayla rode high on the Colossus's back, her body pressed against its warm, armor-plated carapace. Each step the spider took rippled through her spine, not just physically but mentally. She could feel its tension. Its uncertainty, its silent question. Are you ready? She was. Not really, but she also wasn't turning back. They breached the tree line just past dawn. The outer sensor towers of Sentinel Outpost Delta 12 blinked in the distance, red lights cutting through the mist like warning eyes. Automated turrets rotated with idle menace. Nothing moved. Until they did, Kayla kept her hands visible, no weapons. No aggression. The spider's stance was lowered, legs soft against the earth, non-threatening. They had come not as enemies, but that didn't matter. Because to the world above, they were already monsters. The first missile hit the ground 10 meters in front of them. An impact blast, non-lethal, meant to push back. The second exploded overhead. Shrapnel hissed across the Colossus's flank, tearing through its outer shell. Kayla felt it in her skull asterisk, a jolt of pain not hers, and yet it made her cry out all the same. No, she shouted, activating her neural transceiver. This is Private Kayla Reese, Sentinel ID 7743NV. Hold your fire, repeat, hold your fire, silence, then static. Then unidentified hybrid approaching, all units engage. Treat as biohazard class entity. A different voice crackled in, clipped, clinical, cruel. Terminate on sight. Do not allow contamination to spread. Kayla's stomach turned. She tried again, this time reaching through asterisk her mind, not with words, but with the same frequency. She'd once used to feel pain in small animals and dying plants. She pushed emotion outward, fear, truth, desperation. But the receptors at base weren't made to hear. Or worse, they heard and chose not to listen. A barrage of pulse rounds lit up the clearing. The spider twisted, legs bending in impossible angles, flipping Kayla behind a ridge of moss-covered wreckage. Its shriek, low, deep, guttural, rattled the trees. It wasn't fighting back. It could have. It didn't. They fled. Through a valley of glass-thorned ferns, past scorched trenches from wars long buried. Kayla clung to the spider's back as it leapt over gulches, dodging artillery, its wound leaking thick venom that sizzled on the earth. Behind them, sentinel drones swarmed like angry wasps, scanning, locking, failing to compute what she had become. She wasn't dead, but she was just human anymore either. By nightfall, they reached an old listening station, long abandoned, half sunken into the swamp. There, in the silence, Kayla tended the spider's injuries with trembling hands, applying nanogel from her emergency kit directly onto its pulsing wound. The creature flinched but didn't recoil. Its eyes, unblinking and vast, watched her. Kayla sat back exhausted. "They don't see you," she whispered. "They never did." The Colossus responded not with sound but with a thought. "You do." She closed her eyes. For a moment that was enough. Until the second wave came. They weren't human. The aliens arrived without fanfare, no ships, no thunder. Just 5 figures emerging from the shadows of the forest like spirits made of stone and mist. Tall, armorless, pale-skinned with intricate markings glowing along their arms and temples. Kayla reached for her communicator, then stopped. The spider tensed beneath her. The newcomers raised no weapons, asterisk at first asterisk. Then one stepped forward and leveled a long, vine-like apparatus directly at the Colossus's head. Its tip shimmered with bioelectricity, not a gun. Something worse, a leash. Kayla stood. "Don't." They looked at her. Their eyes were silver, cold, ancient. "You don't understand what this is," she said. "It's not your enemy." The one with the weapon spoke, its voice neither masculine nor feminine, but echoing like wind in a vacuum. "It should not exist." Kayla took a step forward, heart racing. "Why? Because it survived what you tried to wipe out." No reply. Another alien raised their hand and pointed, not at her, but at the spider's wound. "You bound yourself to it." Kayla hesitated. "It chose me." Silence. Then you are compromised." The vines lit up. The Colossus crouched, legs bracing for a fight. Kayla placed her hand on its back, breathing slowly, matching its rhythm. "We don't want war," she said, "but if you force it." The lead alien's weapon fired. The beam wasn't energy. It was signal. Kayla felt it slam into the spider's mind like an ice pick, scrambling its neural web. The Colossus screamed, not with voice but through the bond. Pain, rage, betrayal. It reared back. The forest trembled. Kayla screamed too, not from pain but from clarity. They all wanted it gone. The humans, the outsiders. No one wanted what couldn't be controlled. The spider fled again, this time slower, wounded, bleeding inside and out. Kayla clung to it, shielding its eyes from the flickering neurotraps embedded in the ground. Laser wires activated, slicing leaves and bark. If they'd moved an inch off course, they'd have both been cut in two. But the spider knew the land better than anyone. It had dug its tunnels, traced its memories across every stone and root. They escaped, barely, when they finally collapsed in the hollow of a burned-out crawler tank. Kayla pressed her forehead to the Colossus's shell. She felt its breath, ragged and uneven. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are they all afraid of you?" The answer came not in words, but in an image burned into her mind. A long time ago, long before humans ever set foot on Arachne's V, the alien species had come. Not to conquer, but to reshape. The arachnids had resisted. Not with war, but with memory. They preserved too much. Remembered too much. They couldn't be controlled, so they were labeled hostile. Exterminated. And the humans, they picked up where the aliens left off. For security, for progress, Kayla's hands curled into fists. They were both wrong. She looked up into the stars visible through the broken hull above her, eyes burning. "Who's the real invader?" she asked. The spider didn't answer. It didn't need to, because deep in her chest, Kayla already knew she wasn't just running anymore. She wasn't even just surviving. She was standing in the middle of two civilizations, and both had already decided she was a threat. So now she would be, but on her own terms, with 8 legs, venom, memory, and a bond stronger than any weapon. The jungle was waking, and it remembered her name. They called it the final accord, not a treaty, not a ceasefire. Just a shared convenience. The humans and the alien coalition, 2 species that had spent decades accusing each other of exploitation and war crimes, suddenly stood united on one single point. Kayla Reese and the arachnid entity must be eliminated. The justification was simple, sanitized. Unclassified biological convergence poses exponential risk too. Cross-species equilibrium and psychological integrity. Recommendation: total erasure. Kayla read the transmission 3 times. The words didn't change. Biological convergence, she muttered. That's what I am now, not a soldier, not a voice. Just a category, just a problem. They didn't try to kill her outright, not yet. Instead, they summoned her, an open channel, an invitation to negotiate. A rare chance, they said, for her to reclaim her identity. To abandon the bond, to prove she was still human. She didn't want to go, but she knew she had to. So she and the Colossus returned, not to the human outpost, nor to the alien encampment, but to a demilitarized clearing between both fronts. A field that once teemed with wildlife, and now hosted only mines and motion detectors. She dismounted, walked alone toward the platform. A human admiral stood on one side, flanked by drones, exosuits, and commanders in mirrored visors. Across from him, the alien envoy, tall, blue-veined, and motionless. Their words drifting through frequency-modulated translators. Neither side looked at her. They looked asterisk through asterisk her. The admiral spoke first. You've compromised tactical security across 2 sectors. Entire protocols were invalidated the moment you merged with that thing. He didn't say asterisk partner asterisk. He said asterisk thing asterisk. The alien envoy added coldly. Your psychic profile no longer fits within allowable species parameters. Kayla narrowed her eyes, and a thin smile tugged at the admiral's lips. You want a way out, we're offering it. He gestured behind him. A small transport drone hummed quietly, a surgical pod affixed to its core. Sever the bond. Deliver the creature's remains. You'll be cleared for full neurological rehabilitation. And reinstatement. The alien envoy didn't blink. We will erase all record of your divergence. You'll be restored. Restored, Kayla repeated. To what? Neither answered. She looked past them, to the Colossus standing at the tree line. Still waiting, wounded but alert, it had heard everything. And it did not move. She turned toward it, her voice low. Why aren't you fighting back? No emotion came at first. Just warmth, stillness. Then a whisper through the bond, not in words but in something deeper. Because you are the only part of this world I do not wish to kill. Kayla's breath caught. The spider did not hate them. Not even now, because she was enough. That was its answer. She looked back at the admiral and the envoy. No. Their eyes narrowed. Kayla stepped backward. I'm not giving you anything. The admiral gestured. This is your last chance, Reese. After this, you're already gone, she said. Then she ran. The first barrage hit 30 seconds later. Drones swept down from the clouds. Alien artillery surged from the ground. The Colossus roared, leaping over shockwaves, spiraling through plasma arcs. Kayla climbed to its back mid-run, fingers sliding into the neural saddle. They didn't head for cover. They headed for the command zone. Straight into the storm. Outpost Omega-3 housed the communications array, the only place on the surface capable of wideband projection. It sat at the heart of a plateau, ringed in defense grids and kill zones, protected from sky and ground alike. But it wasn't built to stop something like asterisk them. The Colossus crashed through the northern wall, legs moving in perfect sync. Kayla could feel each motion before it happened. Together, they were a single arc of motion, hunter and hunted inverted. Soldiers opened fire. Kayla didn't return fire, she didn't kill. She ducked, weaved, moved with impossible speed, racing for the tower core. The spider shielded her from every blast, ignoring its wounds. Not attacking, only protecting, they reached the control center. Kayla leapt from the saddle, slammed her palm onto the interface. Her sentinel credentials were revoked, but her bond bypassed firewalls. The Colossus fed its own neural pattern into the node, cracking the encryption not with logic, but memory. The system screamed, then opened. A neural projection amplifier extended from the wall, dusty, old but functional. Kayla locked the frequency. No words, just connection. She sent it through the jungle, through the human camps, the alien forward bases, through every helmet, every comlink, every damn datapad. Emotion raw and undiluted, not rage, not vengeance. Just an asterisk mind that remembered burning, that remembered losing its kin, that remembered hiding, waiting, mourning, hoping, and choosing. The projection hit like thunder. Soldiers dropped their weapons, overwhelmed by alien grief. One dropped to his knees, another backed away from his turret. A medic sobbed openly, not understanding why. The alien scouts paused. Their movements faltered. Some touched their own temples in silence. The world felt. For one terrifying, miraculous moment, it understood. But the moment didn't last. A voice broke through the comms. Ignore the signal, destroy the core, neutralize the host. A high-powered railgun locked onto the tower. Kayla screamed, "No!" The Colossus lunged. The shell fired. It struck the base of the tower, not the spider, but enough to bring the whole platform down. Kayla fell. The last thing she saw before darkness closed around her was the spider wrapping its limbs around her. Body shielding her once again, not with venom, with choice. The sky bled acid, not rain, not wind, just a storm of chemical death rolling in from the dead side of Arachne's V, where nothing green had grown for centuries. The clouds split with streaks of phosphorescent corrosion, falling in sheets that hissed as they devoured metal and stone alike. Kayla stumbled through the ruins of Outpost Omega-3, half conscious, half broken. Her armor peeled in places, seared by debris, her legs barely obeyed. But she didn't fall, because something massive still stood over her. The Colossus. It limped beside her, steps uneven, one leg shattered at the joint. Cracks ran along its shell, oozing bioluminescent blood. But it moved, still protecting her, even as the sirens screamed overhead. Even as the railguns rearmed and drone swarms regrouped, even as the sky collapsed, it refused to leave her side. They reached the final ridge. Above them, the command battery preparing a final plasma strike, enough to vaporize the entire sector and everyone in it. Kayla's eyes met the spiders. They didn't speak, they didn't need to, then it moved. The blast lit the horizon like a second sun. Kayla barely had time to see it leap, its silhouette arching against the storm. Impossibly graceful, impossibly defiant. She screamed its name, not aloud but through the bond, through every nerve in her body. Don't, but it already had. It struck the plasma shell midair, absorbing it, redirecting it. Its limbs curling inward like petals around a fragile core. The explosion shattered the clouds, and when the smoke cleared, there was no Colossus left. Just silence, just ash. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't broken. Not because it didn't hurt, but because grief wasn't heavy enough to carry the weight of what it had given her. So Kayla returned, not to the outpost, not to the camps. She went underground, back into the tunnels, through the hidden paths only they had known. To the hollow in the rock where they had met, where it had chosen her, where she had become something more than human. And there, in the heart of that sacred place, she dug with her hands, bleeding, shaking, silent. She buried what remained, fragments of chitin, a piece of leg, a broken eye. Not a corpse, a memory. Then she sat and waited. It began as a flicker. A warmth in the stone. She thought it was hallucination or grief playing tricks. But then the ground shifted, pulsed. Light leaked from beneath the burial mound, soft, blue, rhythmic. She knelt and gasped. Tiny filaments were blooming from the soil. Not roots, not fungi, eggs, thousands of them. Pale, pulsating, cocooned in the same silk-like membrane that once wrapped her in safety. Each one glowed faintly, and inside movement, life. Many small, too small to be weapons, too fragile to be monsters, but unmistakably arachnid, not clones, not soldiers. Children, a new generation, not born from hate, not engineered in rage, but grown in silence, in sanctuary, in asterisk choice asterisk. Kayla fell to her knees again, overwhelmed, not by sorrow this time, but all the Colossus had known. It hadn't just shielded her from death. It had asterisk seeded the future. She didn't leave immediately. Instead, she spent hours, maybe days, transcribing every last fragment of their shared neural link into her portable drive. Every memory, every emotion, every symbol, every connection. She encoded it all, not for glory, not for revenge, but because someone, someday, would need to understand. Then she stood and walked away. 1 week later, the world changed. Without warning, every remaining arachnid life form on Arachne's V began to retreat. Not in fear, not in surrender, but in grace. Tunnels collapsed behind them. Nesting zones faded into moss. No attacks, no casualties. The great spiders simply vanished, melting back into the land they had protected long before humans or aliens had learned to exploit it. They left behind no warnings. No threats, just space and silence. Command was quick to rewrite the narrative. A memo circulated across the unified strategic archive. Spontaneous ecological reversion due to unstable atmospheric variables and terrain destabilization. Hostile entities neutralized by environmental factors. Sentinel forces secure, threat resolved. No mention of Kayla. No mention of the sacrifice. No mention of the creature that had leapt into fire to save the very species that called it abomination. Officially she had gone rogue, unofficially she was dead. But those who had seen her, the medics who'd felt the emotions from the broadcast, the soldiers who had lowered their weapons in that moment, the alien scouts who now chose silence over pursuit. They remembered, and some whispered, of a girl who rode a monster, of a spider that chose peace, of a bond that nearly broke a war. Kayla walked alone now beneath the fractured sky, her armor scorched and half melted. She carried nothing but a data core on her back, filled with the memories of a creature no archive would recognize as sentient. But she remembered every step, every pulse, every time it could have killed but chose not to. And as she climbed the ridge overlooking the valley it had once called home, Kayla smiled, not with joy, but with truth. She was no longer a soldier, no longer a daughter of any flag. She was the last witness to a forgotten mercy, and perhaps the first of something else. Something just beginning. Kayla never received a medal. No commendation, no citation, no legacy etched into the walls of command halls or military archives. Her name was omitted from the debrief reports, her role rewritten or redacted. But the data she carried, the emotional echo of an ancient mind, could not be silenced. And in time, it began to speak louder than any official record. She did not return to her post. She did not seek reinstatement. Instead, she vanished into the quiet corners of the fringe worlds, where she spent months decoding the signal no one else could hear. Not language, emotion, raw primal complex beyond words. A lattice of memory and instinct that wove not just survival, but meaning. And for the first time in humanity's history, someone dared to translate it, not with software but with asterisk feeling. Kayla became the first human to ever catalog the emotional lexicon of a non-human intelligence. Not as a scientist, not as a soldier, but as a witness. Her journals weren't technical. They read more like reflections, half poetry, half philosophy, all carved from experience. In one of the first entries, she published to the Off-Grid Collective Archive, she wrote, "Being human was never about commanding all things below us. It was about choosing not to fear what doesn't look like us. The words rippled outward quietly, no headlines, no press releases, just echoes shared between those who'd once stood behind turrets and wondered if the thing charging them was really a monster. Kayla's notes spoke of a creature that chose restraint over rage. That shielded its only ally not because it was told to, but because it wanted to. She didn't speak of war, she spoke of choice. Eventually, others began to listen. A group of rogue scientists, field medics, and discharged sentinels formed the first iteration of what would become the Sympathetic Interface Initiative *. It wasn't a military project. It had no funding from command, but it had something stronger, a purpose that couldn't be weaponized. They studied emotional resonance, not to control, but to understand. They built small echo chambers, rooms designed to amplify and record emotional signals rather than suppress them. In these chambers, empathic recruits weren't trained to attack. They were taught to feel without flinching, to listen without judging, to connect without rewriting, because that was the gift Kayla left behind, not tactics, not strategy, but a reminder. There are ways to survive that do not require domination. Her final journal entry was not encrypted. It was left open, free to access, floating in the collective archive, without password or gate. It simply read, "If you're human, don't ask how many monsters the world hides. Ask if, when one of them reaches out to you, you still remember how to hold without striking." No one knows where she went. Some say she disappeared into the forests of another frontier planet, looking for echoes of the bond she once shared. Others believe she walks among ruins long thought dead, helping new minds speak for the first time. But wherever she is, one truth remains. She was never just a rider of a spider. She was the bridge between silence and understanding, between fear and connection, between what we fight and what we might learn to call kin. And she left behind a question that refuses to go away. When the next one reaches out, will we still be capable of listening?